It appears Tucker Carlson has been spotted in a connecting flight from Turkey to Russia and now seen in Russia itself. Many people speculating that Tucker may in fact be going to go interview Vladimir Putin as he had talked about in the past. One thing I'm curious about is will he possibly be interviewing Edward Snowden as well? This is something I am truly excited to see because we need to be able to hear from our opposition and our enemies to understand their mindset, because the world needs to be able to hear from Vladimir Putin. He's wrong for what he's done in Ukraine. He's a despotic oligarchic thug that's willing to sacrifice innocent Russians to go kill innocent Ukrainians at the behest of trying to keep NATO at bay. Well, here's the thing. Like many people within the political class in the United States government, Vladimir Putin is also a war criminal, and that is something that is perfectly understandable. But to act like we in the US, in the West, are not responsible for horrific actions that have brought upon death and destruction akin to the actions of what Vladimir Putin has done in Ukraine, but to countries across the Middle East, well, it's nonsensical. We have to hold an equal standard to understand that everyone that comes to this table has blood on their hands. And with that fact, it's important that we can listen to our opposition to see why they hold the ideals that they hold, so we can counter them in real time by using truth and sunlight as the best disinfectant to smoke out their bullshit if they are putting any forward. And well, it appears that with the most recent interview that Tucker Carlson may be getting, so many people within the United States are claiming that Tucker shouldn't be allowed to re-enter the country. Tucker should be arrested upon re-entry. People like Bill Kristol claiming that Tucker should never be allowed to come back within the United States because of the fact that he was willing to go interview someone like Vladimir Putin. Well, here's the thing. I remember after 9/11 when Barbara Walters got an interview with Vladimir Putin to talk about him or talk with him about the nature of correlating and coalescing with the West against that of the greater war on terror. But what do we see? It doesn't matter that this is something that's happened in the past. No, Tucker Carlson talking to Vladimir Putin is an unprecedented event, and we have to act like it's some new moment in history. It's ridiculous. It's nonsensical. We have to understand what our opposition is saying and why they're saying it. Otherwise, we doom ourselves to possible damnation through the possibility of never being able to achieve peace for those who are being subjected to the meat grinder of this war. Let's get into it. We'll be starting with Adam Kinzinger saying he's a traitor. Of all the people, Adam Kinzinger, former congressman, coming out and saying Tucker Carlson's a traitor because he's willing to possibly have a conversation with Vladimir Putin, which we do not even know if that's why Tucker's in Russia. I would assume so, considering he's talked about wanting to interview him in the past, as well as Edward Snowden. He's also talked about wanting to go check out Russia because it's one of the only countries he feels like he hasn't been able to visit because of restrictions. So here's the thing. Adam Kinzinger is quite literally the definition of nothing more than a fool, and people could classify him as a traitor. And why? Because he got caught sleeping with a Chinese spy named Fang Fang that was caught having ties to the CCP itself. But yet this goon is willing to go out and call someone else a traitor. Hilarious. But if you really want to get to the nature of who a traitor is, that would be Bill Kristol, someone who was consistently pushing the mindset of the Project for a New American Century, which fueled the endless wars that caused the deaths of so many Americans, and not only that, the deaths of millions of people in the Middle East. But don't you worry, Bill Kristol is most certainly the moral authority you should go to. Perhaps we need a total and complete shutdown of Tucker Carlson re-entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what's going on. And here we have from Josie the Redheaded Libertarian, being a journalist, or barring a journalist from coming home is some KGB shit, Bill. Do you really think Bill has a problem with that? He doesn't even care about the fact that there were millions of people that have died in the wars that he's advocated for. If you want to see someone tear into Bill Kristol and treat him like the fucking ghoul that he is, Scott Horton had a debate with him and it was absolutely phenomenal. Tearing him limb from limb, shredding him and hanging him by his own words. Truly a master class of how you decimate the regime class. Well, let's go in once more to someone else before we move on, and that would be Joshua Reed Eagle. And I've got a lot of disagreements with Joshua. He's someone who's a libertarian as well, and realistically, many people who are libertarians understand that just because we're on the same team doesn't mean we're actually on the same team. And, well, I would argue Joshua is most certainly of that of the progressive leftist camp, which I don't have an issue with, like, any flavor of libertarian. Realistically, I'm perfectly okay with having the conversation with everyone, because otherwise we're completely removing ourselves from the ability to, let's say, grow as people and really achieve a proper end for society, which is what we all hopefully would want. Well, Joshua is fairly biased against Tucker Carlson, and he considers him nothing more than that of a propagandist, and it's kind of hilarious considering the fact of who he would put forward as a journalist, but nonetheless, I digress. Here we see from Joshua Reed Eagle on Twitter, carrying water for dictators doesn't promote peace, it normalizes evil. Interesting that. And someone said to him, did Barbara Walters normalize evil when she interviewed Egyptian President Anwar Sadat in 1977, Fidel Castro in 77, Vladimir Putin in 2001, Gaddafi in 89, Chavez in 07, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in 2011, Abdul of Saudi Arabia in 2005, or Yasser Arafat in 1977? So did she. And he says, Barbara Walters is a journalist, Tucker Carlson is a propagandist. These two are not the same. And it's one of those things where it's just very clear that his bias is shining through and he has no capacity to see through the lens that's clouded his vision because he's stuck within the fog of war effectively. And again, I like Joshua. I think he's actually a decent voice for liberty. I disagree with him on so many different things, but that's fine. Who cares? We can have those conversations about why we disagree and where we disagree. But the fact that he's sitting here calling someone like Tucker Carlson a propagandist is just utterly hilarious in my opinion. And I can see why someone would make that argument if they were caught in their own, like, let's say, school of fish that they've been swimming in and they've been talking with people that consistently parrot the ideas that they themselves believe. And well, it's not that Joshua's siloed off. He deals with people that disagree with him all the time. It's the fact that it's still very hard to escape that pool that you've been swimming in when you're so deeply entrenched in it. Now we go on to Benny Johnson, who has a clip of Tucker Carlson saying, last time Tucker Carlson tried to interview Russian President Vladimir Putin, he says the NSA under the Biden administration was spying on his emails and leaked them to the media. I remember seeing this when it happened, and Tucker was surprised that the NSA was spying on him. And it's like, how? How is this something that actually surprises you? But granted, Tucker being someone who's lived in DC for so long and swam in that specific pond and was so deeply entrenched in it, it's quite apparent why he wouldn't expect these things. Because it was so beyond the realm of understanding of what he was treated with the ethos of what government represents as he grew up and developed in Washington, that now, as the veneer has been shattered, Tucker has been coming out and standing against it, and that's why he's become one of the most popular voices in the world. Let's go ahead and throw it into this clip.
The Biden administration's largest intelligence gathering agency, the NSA, had been reading my private emails. Even saying that out loud is weird. It's one of those segments we never thought we would do ever. But the country has changed that much that fast. And honestly, the whole thing was kind of shocking. The government was spying on us? Come on. It seemed crazy. But it's true. And no one in Washington appeared to be shocked in the slightest. In fact, the usual shills right after our segment had a ready explanation for it. Either it never happened at all, they said, just a cable news show lying for ratings, or there must have been a good reason it happened. And they began furiously making excuses for why the NSA did it. A powerful, heavily politicized spy agency surveilling journalists who've been critical of the regime? No problem. It's perfectly normal. Just don't call it spying. But it's not normal at all. It is third world. And as we told you repeatedly, it did happen. Now that has been confirmed. Yesterday, we learned that sources in the so-called intelligence community told at least one reporter in Washington what was in those emails, my emails. There was nothing scandalous in there, thank God. We're happy to report that. Late this spring, I contacted a couple of people I thought could help get us an interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin. I told nobody I was doing this other than my executive producer, Justin Wells. I wasn't embarrassed about trying to interview Putin. He's obviously newsworthy. I'm an American citizen. I can interview anyone I want, and I plan to. But still, in this case, I decided to keep it quiet. I figured that any kind of publicity would rattle the Russians and make the interview less likely to happen. But the Biden administration found out anyway by reading my emails. I learned from a whistleblower that the NSA planned to leak the contents of those emails to media outlets. Why would they do that? Well, the point, of course, was to paint me as a disloyal American, a Russian operative, been called that before, a stooge of the Kremlin, a traitor doing the bidding of a foreign adversary. And of course, I'm hardly the only person who's been accused of those things in the last several years. We've seen this movie several times now. At the same moment the communist Chinese government increases its already stunning level of control over this country, our leaders prattle on about the threat of Vladimir Putin. He's an evildoer, they tell us, a totalitarian dictator. Vladimir Putin does things that no American leader would even consider. He runs domestic disinformation campaigns. He lies to the public. He punishes people for opposing him or for believing the wrong things. He even uses intelligence agencies to spy on his own citizens. Beyond the pale stuff. So no decent American would interview Vladimir Putin, at least no reporter from Fox News. That was the point they wanted to make. That's why they planned to leak the contents of my emails to news organizations. And yesterday, as noted, we learned they actually did it. Even now, some in the media are claiming that we deserve this. Emailing with people who know Putin, are you? Of course the NSA is watching you. That's what you get. But that's hardly the point. By law, the NSA is required to keep secret the identities of American citizens who've been caught up in its vast domestic spying operations. So by law, I should have been identified internally merely as a U.S. journalist or American journalist. That's the law. But that's not how I was identified. I was identified by name. I was unmasked. People in the building learned who I was. And then my name and the contents of my emails left that building at the NSA and wound up with a news organization in Washington. That is illegal. In fact, it is precisely what this law was designed to prevent in the first place. We cannot have intelligence agencies used as instruments of political control. Both parties used to agree on that. Democrats were especially adamant on the point, but not anymore. So that's exactly what is happening here. We need to find out how this happened. Who did it? Who allowed it? Paul Nakasone would know the answer. Paul Nakasone is the highly political director of the NSA. Paul Nakasone would have been required personally to approve my unmasking. That's how it works. Paul Nakasone should explain who asked for that unmasking, and he should do it immediately. Avril Haines would also likely know the answer. Haines is the even more political director of National Intelligence. She oversees all of it. She may have approved the unmasking as well. She would certainly know who asked for it and who approved it. That's her job to know. She should release that information immediately, tonight. And if Avril Haines does not release that information, she should be forced to release that information. We don't have a lot of power as a TV show, but we're going to keep pushing for that because it matters, not just to us, but to the entire country. You can't have a democracy in a place where unaccountable spy agencies keep people in line by leaking the contents of their emails, discrediting them with their own emails, which they thought were private. You can't, it doesn't work if you allow that. And we suspect congressional Republicans will also demand an answer. Many have finally awakened to the fact that the intelligence agencies, which they have blindly supported for so long, are not, in fact, their friends. They're not the friends of anyone in this country. They're dangerous. That's obvious.
Tucker coming to the revelation that, well, these encrypted messaging apps akin to that of Signal and Telegram aren't really as protected as he might have once thought, something for you to all consider. Well, one thing I absolutely adore about this is how it exposes the regime's hand, because it just shows exactly what they are. People who do nothing more than extort information so they can go ahead and manipulate the playing field that people operate in. Tucker Carlson is someone who's just trying to have a conversation and interview Vladimir Putin, much like Barbara Walters had done in the past. But apparently that doesn't matter, because he's not someone who toes the line of the regime and is someone who will gladly go outside the spectrum of allowable opinion, asking questions that realistically are not going to be perpetrated by that of the status quo itself. And because of this, the NSA was openly spying on him. And when I say openly, of course it was behind closed doors, but nothing more than an open secret in itself amongst the agencies and the people within the upper echelon of the establishment class, because Tucker Carlson being a dissident voice is something that is most certainly not wanted, respected, or appreciated amongst that of what? The people who are mouthpieces for the powerful. Well, we go on here now to see MSNBC, the real reason Tucker Carlson supports Russia's Putin. And they love to push these things out that, well, if you don't support Ukraine and endless funding to Vladimir Zelensky, then you must be someone who's in full allegiance to Putin. If you don't support endless funding to Israel and funding for their wall and their protection and their border and making sure that the people of Israel are secure by giving them tens of billions of dollars, well, then clearly you must be anti-Israeli. You must be anti-Semitic and hate Jewish people. This is the ridiculous mindset that consistently gets towed out, and I must be blunt with you, and it's very apparent. People are tired of it, and you using these moral flags to wave at people to act like you're more noble than them, this holier-than-thou hand-wringing, it's completely wrung dry, and no one has any patience for you anymore. And you've done this to yourself. You've destroyed the value and the weight you had behind these words that you could use to beat people down as a moral cudgel, all because of the fact that you overplayed your hand, used them too much, and destroyed these things in the public eye. It used to be in America one of the worst things you could be called was racist. And now someone calls you a racist and you just laugh at them and call them a fucking dumbass, as you most certainly should. And now we go over here to the Washington Post. Tucker Carlson finds a new booster. Russian TV. So because a journalist is effectively being played across the entirety of the wide world, and with it, Tucker Carlson most certainly being listened to across the planet because of the fact that, well, his show is put out on the internet and he's such a popular voice. It's very apparent that he wouldn't just be getting, I don't know, viewership just in the United States. But no, that doesn't matter. What matters is you have to focus on the fact that Tucker Carlson is being bolstered by the Russians. And I guarantee you there's going to be a cavalcade of new outlets that are pushing out, once again, endless bullshit about Tucker Carlson being a Russian propagandist, because what we can see here from Newsweek, Tucker Carlson being spotted in Moscow sparks frenzied speculation, and that speculation is utterly hilarious because what we can see is it's from people like Adam Kinzinger, like Bill Kristol, people who are utterly traitors to the country that will sit there and, like I said, point the finger at you, moralize with their ever so holier than thou hand wringing as they claim they're a better person than you, as they call you what? A traitor, all because you didn't want to sit there and do nothing more than, let's say, think freely, and you just wanted to actually have information that you could find and come to your own understanding of these things. Well, that's not accepted. You have to understand that you need to go to MSNBC, you have to go to CBS, you have to go to ABC, to Newsweek, to The Guardian, to the New York Times, because these are the arbiters of truth, don't you know? We can't have you making these decisions on your own. No, that's too dangerous. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. The fact that the media is freaking out the way that they are about Tucker Carlson possibly interviewing Vladimir Putin, utterly hilarious, and I love it because watching them spin realistically gets my jimmies off because these people are nothing more than dumbasses and should be laughed at and mocked as such. Well, it appears that that's all I've got for this. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. One thing you have to remember is while Tucker Carlson going to interview Vladimir Putin would be a major bonus for the entirety of the world to see the mindset of someone who is involved in one of the biggest hot wars on the planet currently, you have to realize that much like every other American politician that rules over the establishment and the military-industrial complex's actions, Vladimir Putin, much like them, is nothing more than an oligarchic gangster that does not value individual human life. I'm going to keep it there. Thank you for watching. Thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Stay lovely, stay great, tell someone you love them. Peace out.